Number 11. Crystal McReynolds. 34-year-old Crystal McReynolds was pregnant when someone shot her in the face outside a home in Fielddale, Virginia one night in 2020. A responding lieutenant found her on the porch and talked to her while waiting for paramedics to arrive. Crystal identified 35-year-old Thomas Christopher McDowell as her shooter and confirmed his identity in a photograph obtained by the lieutenant. She was rushed to the hospital where she died from her injuries. According to police, the house where McReynolds was shot was known for drug activity and was also the location of a previous homicide. McDowell pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 38 years in prison, followed by 10 years of supervised release. It's unclear whether he was connected to any of the ongoing problems at the residence where the crime occurred. Number 10. Antonella Valcidia. Upon arriving home in Catania, Italy from his job as a surgeon one night in 1993, Vincenzo Morici discovered the brutally slain body of his wife, a medical doctor named Antonella Valcidia. Years went by without any leads as to who her killer might be. In the days leading up to the murder, Valcidia had received numerous silent phone calls and an anonymous letter warning her to be careful of her son, but the source of the bizarre harassment was never discovered, and it wasn't until 2006 that investigators discovered a new clue that would lead the case in a whole new direction. Using new imaging technology that wasn't available at the time of Valcidia's murder, experts digitally enhanced an image of a blood stain found at the scene. It appeared to contain the letters ENZ, which detectives theorized was written in a desperate attempt to identify the killer. They also believed the letters represented part of her husband's shortened name, Enzo. Prosecutors charged Morici with his wife's murder for the first time in 2007. He was acquitted, but the court tried him again, and the outcome was the same. After a third attempt at prosecuting Morici failed to secure a conviction, he was officially exonerated of the crime. But the bloodstain has left many wondering if Antonella was truly trying to tell the world who her killer was, and if so, who that person is. Unfortunately, the 30-year-old case remains unsolved. Number 9. Remy Lee. When first responders in Paterson, New Jersey asked a dying expectant mother who her shooter was, she mustered up enough strength to tell them that her baby's father was responsible. 31-year-old Remy Lee was found outside her apartment complex, where authorities alleged that 30-year-old Donqua Thomas waited for up to 2 hours until the victim arrived home. The killer ambushed Lee with multiple gunshots as she got out of her car and left her to die in the parking lot. In addition to telling emergency personnel who had shot her, Lee identified the shooter as Quay to witnesses who asked before responders arrived. She was rushed to the hospital where she gave birth to a baby before succumbing to her injuries. Thomas was apprehended after a brief manhunt and was charged with first-degree murder and being a felon in possession of a firearm. Shortly after his arrest, it was revealed that he could face a minimum of 30 years in prison if convicted of the murder charge. The current status of the case is unclear. During one of Thomas's first hearings, his lawyer told the judge that there was no history of domestic violence between his client and the victim, and claimed that the defendant had no reason to want to harm Lee. It did little to sway the judge, who ordered Thomas held without bail pending the outcome of the case. Number 8. Lizette Cuesta. On what started out as a normal night in 2018, 4 UPS workers discovered 19-year-old Lizette Andrea Cuesta clinging to life as she lay bleeding along a remote road in San Jose, California. The young woman had gathered the strength to crawl to where passing drivers would notice her after being stabbed multiple times and thrown out of a vehicle. Cuesta fought to stay alive long enough to tell authorities that her co-worker, 19-year-old Daniel Gross, was responsible for attacking her. She died several hours after she was found. Her ability to identify her attacker enabled police to catch up with the suspects before they destroyed critical evidence related to the case. In a jailhouse interview with local station KTVU, Gross told reporters that he just snapped and that he acted in self-defense when Cuesta elbowed him. He claimed that he used a knife he had given Cuesta for protection to carry out the crime, and that he had an intimate encounter with the victim in the back seat, while his fiancée, 25-year-old Melissa Leonardo, drove. Just 3 months after the killing, Gross pleaded guilty to murder. Leonardo was also charged with murder, but the outcome of her case is unclear. Number 7. Matthew Pike. In 2008, a German office worker named David Heiss met a young British woman named Joanna Witten on a gaming website and became obsessed with her. He bombarded her with emails and unwanted messages and even traveled to Nottingham twice to visit her and her boyfriend, Matthew Pike. Joanna continued to reject David's advances until he boiled over with rage and went to England for a third time. He went to the couple's flat and stabbed Matthew 86 times. Before he died, Matthew managed to write the first 3 letters of David's name in blood on the side of his computer in an attempt to let police know who his killer was. British authorities charged David Heiss with murder. During his trial, he claimed that he stabbed Matthew in self-defense and that he didn't mean to kill him. As you can probably imagine, the court found this incredibly difficult to believe given the excessive nature of the attack and David's clear obsession with Joanna. He was found guilty and received a life sentence with a minimum of 18 years. Number 6. Coriana Hines. When police arrived at an apartment in Birmingham, Alabama to find 24-year-old Coriana Chantrice Hines dying from a gunshot wound in early 2023, it was unfortunately too late to save her life. The shooter had barged into the apartment and opened fire on Hines, who was pregnant at the time, and 2 young girls who survived with injuries. Before Hines passed away, she identified her boyfriend, 34-year-old Andrew Horace Goldsmith IV, as the gunman. Authorities launched a manhunt and issued a capital murder warrant against the suspect, who quickly made it onto the state's most wanted list. Goldsmith had previously faced 2 capital murder charges and 2 attempted murder charges in an unrelated case back in 2017, but was acquitted. About a week after Coriana's murder, police spotted him at a gas station and attempted to take him into custody. He fled in a vehicle and crashed into another car and a fence before coming to a stop. Officers approached to find Goldsmith dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Number 5. Wife implicates in-laws. A 25-year-old woman from Uttar Pradesh in northern India, known only as Anjum, met an untimely death in 2023 after being taken to a hospital with serious injuries. Just 2 weeks earlier, she had gone to visit her family and told them that her in-laws were harassing her for a dowry payment in the form of cash and a car. Hours before she died, Anjum went to a local magistrate and made a recorded statement accusing her in-laws of forcing her to drink acid for her parents' failure to pay the dowry. By the time her family members found out she was in the hospital, she was in critical condition. She died shortly after being relocated to another hospital, and her family filed a complaint based on their suspicions of foul play. When news of the horrifying incident broke, a police spokesperson cautioned the public that they were taking the matter very seriously. According to the most recent update, law enforcement was at the beginning stages of taking formal action against Anjum's husband of 6 years and his parents. Number 4. Ashley Williams. After hearing multiple gunshots and the sound of a car speeding off one night in 2016, a Shreveport, Louisiana resident rushed outside to find 37-year-old Huey Leonard and 27-year-old Ashley Williams in a vehicle with grave injuries. Leonard was unresponsive, but Williams was still conscious. Speaking with KSLA, the Good Samaritan recalled seeing Williams feeling up and down her body in search of her gunshot wound as she fell out of the driver's seat. She repeatedly said the name Arthur Anderson. Before she succumbed to her injuries, Williams told the neighbor to tell everyone that this was who shot her. She was also able to provide a description of the killer's vehicle. Arthur Anderson was Ashley's ex-boyfriend. They had broken up just days earlier. On the night of the shooting, a vehicle rear-ended the victim's car, forcing them off the road and into a ditch. Anderson approached and opened fire on Williams and Leonard, then fled the scene. He was convicted of the double murder and was sentenced to 2 life terms without parole. Number 3. Keith Theriot. In 2019, deputies from the Ascension Parish Sheriff's Office in Louisiana responded to a 911 call from what sounded like a victim in distress. They arrived at a residence to find husband and wife Keith and Elizabeth Theriot suffering from gunshot wounds. Before he died from his injuries, Keith identified the shooter as his son, 21-year-old Dakota Theriot. By then, Dakota had already murdered his girlfriend, 20-year-old Summer Ernest, her father, 43-year-old Billy Ernest, and her younger brother. Just weeks earlier, he had moved into the family's trailer after his parents kicked him out. Deputies found Dakota at his grandmother's house in Virginia during a multi-state manhunt. They were already at the property when he arrived and pointed a gun at them, forcing the deputies to take cover. Thankfully, he complied with their demands to drop the gun and was apprehended without incident. To avoid the death penalty, Dakota pleaded guilty to all 5 murders and received 5 life sentences. His motive for committing the brutal slayings remains unclear. Number 2. Elijah Rideau. When police officers in Beaumont, Texas heard multiple gunshots coming from the direction of a nearby residence one day in 2019, they rushed straight to the scene. As they approached a duplex, one of the officers' body cams captured footage of a car fleeing the scene. They entered the home to find 4 roommates, Elijah Isaiah Rideau, Alvin Lee Ballard, Bobby Lee Wyatt, and Shannon Christopher Sutton, suffering from gunshot wounds. An officer asked the men who shot them, and Rideau yelled out the name of a 5th roommate, Lively Stratton Jr. During his trial for the quadruple murder, Stratton argued that he shot the victims in self-defense. The night before the shooting, he and a woman who also lived at the duplex went to a nearby motel because the gas and hot water had been turned off. When they returned, they found the locked door to Stratton's bedroom kicked in and some of his belongings missing. Stratton claimed that when he confronted his roommates, they cornered him in a room, causing him to fear for his life, and that he had only brought a gun to the residence for that exact reason. He said he didn't call the police because he feared being treated like a criminal, and that he thought it was reasonable for him to fire 11 shots. Prosecutors described the incident as an execution, noting that the locations of some of the gunshot wounds weren't indicative of the men charging at Stratton in a threatening manner. The jury convicted Stratton of capital murder, which carries an automatic life sentence in the Texas prison system. Number 1. Amina Saeed. On New Year's Day in 2008, a taxi driver named Yasser Saeed shot his daughters, Amina and Sarah, and abandoned his cab in Irving, Texas. Amina dialed 911 and told the operator that her father had shot her and she was dying. By the time police arrived, both she and Sarah were dead. The media dubbed it an honor killing after learning that Yasser killed his daughters over the lack of complete control he had over their lives. He had recently discovered that Amina was dating outside the family's Muslim faith and had convinced the sisters and their mother to return home after they fled, promising that things would be different. Over the years, Yasser had told his daughters that they would be forced into arranged marriages in Egypt as soon as they became adults. They had virtually no freedom, and he watched their every move. In reality, his possessive behavior had nothing to do with his faith. He wasn't known to be an overly devout Muslim, and his actions were driven by his own dysfunction. And, as many Muslims pointed out after news of the case broke, only radicalist interpretations of Islam promote violence. Law enforcement searched high and low for Yasser for the next 12 years while repeatedly hitting dead ends. They came very close to capturing Saeed at an apartment complex in Texas in 2017, but he fled the moment he realized they were onto him. In 2020, the FBI began surveilling a home in Justin, Texas, where Yasser's son, Islam, and his brother, Yasin, were living. Agents noticed movement inside the house even when Islam and Yasin weren't there, giving them cause to raid the house. Sure enough, they found Yasser. Islam was sentenced to 10 years in prison for raiding his father's life on the run, and Yasin received a 12-year sentence for the same charge. Saeed was found guilty of murdering his daughters and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Thanks for watching. Would you rather live with never having answers about a loved one's suspicious death, or find out that someone you care about disappeared voluntarily and was alive and well after spending years worrying about them and looking for them? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.